Somebody asked me at the end of the year why the great American International Pictures, the purveyors of B-level movies of the 1960s and 70s, was no longer around. Well, they put a lot of money behind this movie, and although the concept was good, the uh, the presentation did lead to a big box office. So today we're talking probably about one of the last major disaster movies of the 1970s, Meteor. Now, directed by Ronald Neame and starring Sean Connery and Natalie Wood, the whole production went off the rails, especially for the special effects, where I think at least 3 or 4 special effects teams were hired and fired. The film's premise, which follows a group of scientists struggling with Cold War politics after an asteroid detected to be on a collision course with Earth, was inspired by a 1967 MIT report, Project Icarus. The screenplay was written by Oscar winner Edward H. North and Stanley Mann. The international cast also includes Carl Malden, Brian Keith, Martin Landau, Trevor Howard, Joseph Campanella, Richard Dysart, and as the president, Henry Fonda. The film was a box office flop and received negative reviews, but it was nonetheless nominated for Academy Award for Best Sound. Now, again, produced by Arnold Orgolini, Theodore R. Pervin, and Run Shaw, with cinematography by Paul Noman, edited by Carl Kress, music by Lawrence Rosenthal. Production company was called Meteor Joint Venture, Palladium Productions, and the Shaw Brothers. Distributed by AIP, released October 1979, a little under 110 minutes. Budget was $16 million, which is huge back then, and only made back $8.4 million and $4.2 in U.S. Rentals. Now, the plot itself is pretty well taken from the headlines, because there's always thought that a meteor is going to hit the Earth and destroy us. Now, after the asteroid Orpheus and the asteroid belt is hit by a comet, dozens of asteroid fragments are sent out in a collision course towards Earth, along with a 5-mile wide fragment, which will cause an extinction-level event. Now, when the United States government engages in political maneuvering, the smaller asteroid fragments preceding the main body wreak havoc on the planet, revealing the threat. The U.S. has a secret orbiting nuclear missile platform satellite named Hercules, which was designed by Dr. Paul Bradley. It was intended to defend Earth against a threat like Orpheus, but instead was commandeered by the U.S. Armed Forces to become an orbiting weapon now aimed at the Soviet Union. After many calculations, it is determined that the 14 nuclear missiles on board Hercules are not enough to stop the asteroid. The U.S. has known that the Soviets have also a similar weapon satellite called Peter the Great in orbit, with its 60 nuclear warheads pointing down towards the United States. Needing the additional firepower to stop Orpheus, the president goes on national television and reveals the existence of Hercules, explaining it was created to meet the threat that Orpheus represents. He also offers the Soviets a chance to save face by announcing they too had the same program and their own satellite weapon. To coordinate the counter effort between the two countries, Bradley requests a Soviet scientist named Dr. Alexei Dubov. Now, Bradley and Harry Sherwood of NASA meet at the Control Center for Hercules, located beneath 195 Broadway in Lower Manhattan. Major General Aldon is the commander of the facility. Dubov and his interpreter, Tatiana Donskaya, arrive, and Bradley goes to work on breaking the ice between them. Since Dubov cannot admit the existence of the Soviet device, he agrees to Bradley's proposal that they work on the theoretical application of how a theoretical Soviet-supplied platform's weapons would be coordinated with the American program. Meanwhile, more meteorite fragments strike Earth, one inside Siberia, and the Soviets finally agree to join in the effort. Both satellites are coordinated and turned towards the incoming large asteroid as smaller fragments continue to strike the planet, causing great damage, including a deadly avalanche in the Swiss Alps and a tsunami which devastates Hong Kong. With hours remaining prior to Orpheus' impact, as planned, Peter the Great's missiles are launched first because of his relative position to the asteroid, with Hercules' missiles turned to be fired 40 minutes later. Now, immediately prior to Hercules' missiles being launched, a splinter fragment is discovered to be heading towards the command center in New York City. If the center is destroyed, Hercules will not be able to launch. With seconds to spare, Hercules receives a signal to fire from the command center and launches his missiles. The splinter impacts the city, destroying the top half of the World Trade Center Twin Towers in a direct hit and creating a large crater in Central Park. Several workers inside the control center are killed when the facility is partially destroyed by the collapse of the building above, and the survivors are forced to work their way out of the control center. by going through the New York subway system, which becomes a trap due to water from the East River flooding the tunnels. Meanwhile, the two flights of missiles link up into their successive larger waves. The Hercules crew reaches a crowded subway station and waits while others try to dig them out. Eventually, the missiles reach the Meteoroid. The first wave of missiles strikes the rock, causing a small explosion. The second wave follows with a larger blast, and the third wave creates an enormous explosion. When the dust clears, the asteroid appears obliterated. In New York City, the radio broadcasts the good news. Orifice is no longer a danger to Earth. Just then, the subway station occupants are rescued. Later at an airport, Dubov, Tatiana, Bradley, and others exchange goodbyes before Dubov and Tatiana depart on a plane for the Soviet Union. Other key supporting actors in the show, including Michael Zaslow, Bibi Besh, and Sybil Danning, luminous all. Now, Teeter R. Pervin received the idea for the story from a Saturday Review article by Ozzy Asmanoff about a meteor hitting a major city in the States. Parvin hired Edmund H. North to write the screenplay, who took further inspiration from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Project Icarus. However, Ronald Neame and Sean Connery disliked both North's script and a rewrite by Stephen Bach, and so hired Stanley Mann to completely rewrite the screenplay. This led to a Writers Guild of America dispute over whether North should be credited as a co-writer. Now, during the writing of the North's first draft, Parvin secured funding and investment from the Shaw Brothers Studio, Warner Brothers, Nippon Herald Films, and American International Pictures. The film was an American International Pictures co-production with a Shaw Brothers studio in British Hong Kong, and $2.7 million of the budget came from a cash-strapped AIP. Now, Neame cast Natalie Wood as Tatiana because she was a daughter of Russian immigrants, and she worked with George Rubinstein to perfect the Leningrad accent. Ali Guinness, Yul Brynner, Rod Steiger, Maximilian Schell, Peter Ustinov, Eli Wallach, Telly Savalas, Theodore Bickel, Richard Burton, and Orson Welles were each considered for the role of Dr. Dubov. Donald Pleasence was cast for the role and filmed a few scenes as the character. However, he departed the production in order to work on, get this, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He was replaced by Brian Keith, who had been cast as General Adlon, and was replaced in that role by Martin Landau. Now, principal photography took place on Halloween Day 1977 to January 27, 78, mainly at MGM in Culver City, with some locations filming in Washington, D.C., St. Moritz, and Hong Kong. The release date was scheduled for June 15, 79, but was pushed back to October 19 due to special effects reshoots after special effects director Frank Vanderveer was fired. Now, here it gets the total disaster. With most of the special effects budget already expanded by Vanderveer, whose work was not usable and subsequently discarded, William Cruz and Margot Anderson were hired to reshoot all the special effects for what money remained. They were also fired and replaced by Paul Kastner and Rob Balak, who were asked to complete the special effects, again with what money remained in the budget, and just 2 months before the film's release. In order to complete the film on time, Kastner and Balak reused footage from the 78 disaster film Avalanche, filmed the Hong Kong tidal wave scene, an improvised water tank in L.A. using cardboard cutouts of buildings, and used 22-inch long nuclear missile satellite miniatures that were far too small for effective filming. Prop designer John Zabrucki, who had previously only worked in television, provided props for the film. Now, the film was originally supposed to receive a score by John Williams, but get this, he left the project. Now, as it stands right now in the film's production, it was received poorly on release. In the New York Times review, Janet Maslin called the film standard disaster fare, adding that suspense and sludgy and the character development nil. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune gave the film 1.5 out of 4 and wrote, "Let's face it, the bottom line of a disaster film is how special art, special effects, and with Meteor, the answer is not very. The big meteor in the picture hurtling towards Earth at 30,000 miles an hour looks pretty well cheap." And what really matters to audience for this kind of film, according to Variety, of course, is not the acting, but the visuals. And here, Meteor gets good, but not great reviews. This is, according to TV Guide, it's an 18 million star-studded disaster film, which in itself is a major disaster. Now, on Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a rating of 5% based on 19 reviews, with the site's consensus being Meteor is a flimsy flick with too much boring dialogue and not enough destruction. At least the pinball game is decent. Now, Charles Champlain of the LA Times wrote that against its own odds, and for once tends to be uninspired but competent, efficient, commercial, and entertaining, with some random moments that are very nice indeed. Now, Marvel Comics also got on board and it published a comic book adaptation of the film by writer, not the actor, Ralph Macchio, and artists Gene Colan and Tom Palmer in Marvel Super Special 14. Now, Samuel Z. Arkoff called Meteor the most difficult production he had ever undertaken by American International Pictures due to high production, special effects, and marketing costs. Now, after the film flopped, the studio cash strap was forced to enter negotiations for a buyout from Filmways. Now, it also received at the 52 Academy Awards in 1980. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Sound. William McCaughey, Aaron Rochin, Michael J. Kohut, and Jack Solomon, but lost, of course. Anybody would have lost to Apocalypse Now. Now, a voice over the end of the film mentions Project Icarus, a report on the concept to use missiles to deflect an airborne-bound asteroid. The original Project Icarus was a student project at MIT in a systems engineering class led by Professor Paul Sandorf in the spring of 1967. He examined methodologies that could deflect an Apollo asteroid named 1566 Icarus. It was found to be a collision course with Earth. Time published an article about the research in June 1967, and the results of the student reports were published in a book the following year. So, not to say it was not considered, but it was all put together. Now, sold up to Filmways, just a little background. It was eventually acquired by Orion Pictures and renamed as Orion Pictures Corporation. So every time you see Orion shows, it was, Filmways. And Filmways was quite good. Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, the Beverly Hillbillies, Mr. Ed, and the Addams Family. Now, the Cagney Lacey was continued by Orion, but some of the projects belonged to MGM via its acquisition of Orion in 98 and a pre-88 Canon Films library until MGM quietly relaunched Orion on September 11th, 2014. Now, why I'm bringing up Filmways, because everything that's old is new again. Orion, again, there's various books on that, but the TV series that went under the banner, you also include the Hollywood Squares for 15 years, the Debbie Reynolds Show, which is very underrated, Mary Hartman, Thundar the Barbarian co-production with Ruby Squeeze, and Cagney and Lacey was Orion's. Feature films, some of the big ones, Midsummer's Night's Dream, The Moonshine War, What's the Matter with Helen, King Lear, Save the Tiger, 2 Minute Warning, The Other Side of the Mountain, The Earthling Dressed to Kill, Without Warning, The Babysitter, Miracle on Ice, the TV film, and Death Wish 2, and Summer Lovers. So, ladies and gentlemen, movies can be a strange thing, especially where the projects can cause a major problem. Now, Filmways, you might be able to see the old logo. It's a very, very 1960s, 1970s, and again, notable films, of course, for Filmways include Sandpiper, Cincinnati Kid, The Fearless Vampire Killers, Ice Station Zebra, Summer Lovers, The Burning, King, Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill, and of course, Blowout. And like I said, to see Orion fail, to see AIP get bought out, it was a weird, heady time in the 1980s for Orion. And of course, you look at all the great winning movies of Orion for Academy Awards until money problems and possibly a lot of cocaine caused it to fail. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story about Meteor. If you like what you're doing here, we're a vintage action horror thriller movies of the 60s and 70s. Let us know what you like, comment, subscribe, or share. Thanks for listening. And if you see a meteor in the sky, just remember Sean Connery and Natalie Wood were fighting on your side, but because they're both gone, maybe they can't stop the meteor from hitting your hometown. Have a good one. Bye.